Bear with me for just a moment, if you would. Okay, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about campaigns in Workamajig. Campaigns are a long-standing feature. They've been part of the system for quite some time, so some of you may be familiar with them here. Others may just kind of be popping in to figure out what they're all about and what they do. There are some new features in our campaigns that it's been a priority of ours recently, primarily driven by some client feedback here to try to make campaign management a little bit easier and a bit more fluid. So we had some pretty major changes come into the system for them recently. If you use campaigns, don't worry. They're just really new features. We haven't really changed the way the workflow operates. We've just given you some additional tools here for how to manage your campaigns and some things to kind of make the process for opening them a teeny bit easier. So for campaigns, if you're not familiar with what they are here, primarily the purpose of a campaign is to give you a means to basically track a group of projects together. That may be for project management purposes, it may be for budget or billing purposes. There's a number of reasons to do that here, but again, Workamajig, the central idea around Workamajig is that you would build a template for each common project type that you have in the system. We have a template for collateral projects. We have a template for radio spot, for website development, just the various different offerings that your agency would have. It obviously is going to differ from agency to agency, and a campaign is kind of a way to say, okay, you know what, I have multiple types of those jobs that would fit under the same umbrella. That may be from a billing standpoint. You may have sold a client a suite of projects, or it can just be, again, for a scheduling standpoint, that these projects are relational. And even though you're going to build them out individually, maybe the timing, you want to track them all together, or you want to keep them all in one place. So campaigns kind of do all of that for you. They are at their core, again, just a grouping of projects. So they're really a reporting envelope. Your team would still track time to projects that would be part of this campaign. A campaign is just a nice big roll up where you can look at that information all in one place. Now, for our campaigns, I mentioned that there's some new changes that have come into the system here for these. So if you are familiar with campaigns, one of the newer features is the ability to assign a team at the campaign level. This also comes with the ability to auto-assign at the campaign level. So again, if you're currently a user working with Workamajig, this is an option that's coming to the system. This is something that's not quite live in the system yet for every agency. Although we do have the ability to turn this on for teams that are interested in this. So I'll be talking through today. If this grabs you as part of the workflow that you may want to use here, you're more than welcome to reach out to support@workamajig.com to enable this particular part of the workflow here. This basically allows you to auto-assign to multiple projects at the same time from a campaign level. Now, before I get too far into the weeds here, I did want to mention I am going to leave a few minutes here towards the end of the call or to the end of the show, the webinar here, to field any questions. If you have any during the course of the call, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll try to grab them as I go, but I will leave a few minutes towards the end of the call. So don't be shy if there's a specific question that you had, if there's anything in particular that you wanted a little bit more detail on here. Now, there's a couple of different ways to set up campaigns here in Workamajig. Just to orient you here in the system, campaigns are underneath the project manager application here. There is a separate campaign screen that you'll see right here. You'll see my goofy client and project and campaign names here on this screen. This screen in itself can be adjusted to kind of get a quick view of where all your campaigns are from a schedule or a financial status. These will turn red, green, or yellow based upon the schedule or the financial status. And you have specific views here that allow you to run reports on campaigns here as well from this screen. This is also where you could create a new campaign into the system here. The plus button will do this here for you. The options you see are going to probably be slightly different from mine. Typically, you'd see name client and then these options here beneath these. So if you don't see GL company or currency, please don't worry about those. Those would be specific to specific types of setups. And again, we're in my test site here. So when you add a campaign into the system, what you're doing is basically adding a shell. You're going to start kind of very similar to a project, except for in this case, we don't even really know the task lines or the schedule pieces. We're going to build the campaign here first. And then the next step, once you've saved that campaign, you would go through a setup process that's actually similar to projects. Just in this instance, we're kind of going a step higher. We're starting with campaigns, then we're looking at the projects or segments that would be part of that campaign, and then finally the individual tasks that would be part of it. Sounds complicated, but it's actually relatively easy if you're using templates. And I'll kind of walk you through what the process looks like here. Now, before we do that, I do want to talk about a few system setup pieces associated with campaigns. If you're using campaigns currently, or if you're interested in them, either of the two, this is really good information here for you in system setup for campaigns. First, we're going to look at transaction preferences here. There is a separate area here for campaigns. This would largely manage the numbering method for a campaign and what the current number is at for a campaign. If you have a specific client or excuse me, project or campaign numbering methodology you'd like to use, there's quite a few here in the dropdown that you can select from. The default is to use a three-piece set here with a prefix for the year, the client ID for the client that you're creating the campaign for, and then the next global number as defined by this number right here. So Workamajig will basically just auto number these for you and just continue to count these up as you go along. You can adjust the numbering methodology here. And you also have the option to allow clients to have multiple clients underneath the same campaign umbrella. That is a bit more of a niche need, but it is here if that's something that you would require out of your campaigns, typically for internal or Marcom teams. The other side that I'd like to show here in system setup would be the security rights for campaigns. Specifically, we have two, so it's kind of nice and easy. One is for view and one is for edit. So both of these are easy to find, either view campaigns or their edit camp. And you can actually just type in view camp and you'll get there here. View is whether or not users can view the campaign listing screen. So that screen that we were on previously that showed the list of the campaigns, that would just show them the top level detail of campaigns, but it wouldn't actually give a user a right to open and view them. You would actually, or to edit them, excuse me. It would be able to open them. But the other side would be edit campaigns. And this does exactly what you think it does. There's not even a tooltip for it. It's just if you want to be able to change the details of a campaign or add new, you'd need this right here. So those are really the securities or the back-end setup pieces for campaigns here. Functionally, for a campaign itself, there's a couple of different ways to go about building a campaign. Now, I have some details in this particular campaign to start out with. Just thought it would be a little bit easier to load some of this in here before we started this session, but I'm going to be able to speak to kind of a couple of different ways for setting up campaigns. And we're going to use the existing projects and estimates to do that. So you may see some instances in here that are a little bit unusual. We're going to see a couple of estimates here, for example. I'll speak to all of this as we go through here, but that's so we can show the different methodologies of creating a campaign. There's really kind of two major ways to approach this and two ways to create and link projects to a campaign. One would be I create a fresh campaign here. I would come into the projects and segments area. This whole area would be blank. And I would basically come in and say, okay, what am I going to add to this project? Or what am I going to add to this campaign? And under the more button, you can create projects. So one common use case for campaigns is, at the outset of a campaign, every project that would be a part of it, we know that we sold the client a suite of offerings here, a brand ID project, a website project, a collateral job, the social media management, things like that. Each one of those would be its own project. So you could come in, assuming that none of these are here, and then come in and hit the more button and then projects and choose from a list of templates that you have already existing in the system to say, I need, a brand ID job, I need a brochure collateral, I need an event template. You can basically come through and pick, and each one of the selections in here would be its own project. So if I grab these three and then added selected, it would actually look something very similar to this. It would create 3 projects for you. Very quickly intake those three projects for you, and then would name those projects with the name of the template. So this one's video production, this one's web design, this one's just called Workamajig template. And so it's kind of a quicker and easier way to add multiple projects underneath the same umbrella. Since we already know what the client ID is, we don't need to ask you for things like the start date. That's going to be the start date of the campaign here itself. And so kind of one of the major processes here, if you know all of the projects at the outside of a campaign, or even if you don't, if you just know that you're going to kick it off with 3 projects and maybe you'll add more as you go along, this is kind of a process that you can follow here. You could just basically come and hit that more button, select projects, and then choose from the list of templates that you'd like to add here. Now, if you want to add multiple types of the same template, you can do that as well. You'd basically just come in here, click the template, add it, and then you'd have to go through the process again of clicking more and then click projects. But you are able to add as many types of the same template. You just can't do multiple here in the screen at the same time. I wouldn't be able to do logo and then, do like 3 separate logo projects, although I don't know why you would do that. But, let's just say if you did need multiple jobs of the same template type, you can do that. You just need to add them, one at a time, basically. So that's one process. The other is that you can link external processes to or projects to a campaign as well. You may have a project that started as standalone, but now based off of a change from the client or just based off of the way that you want to manage the project, you can bring that project in and link it to a campaign here as well. So this would look to any existing project in your instance. It would typically have you search for a project name or number in here to return the details of that. Let's find other projects for this. No, there's nothing in here specifically for that. So, you basically look for a specific job in here and link the existing job to Workamajig. That job can be started. That job can have time to it. It can already be well underway and still be linked to the campaign. There's no problem either linking or unlinking projects to a campaign at any point in their life cycle. Additionally, you also have the option to link existing campaigns to, or excuse me, existing projects to your campaigns from the project themselves. If I jump into any project in the system, let's go with this workflow test that I had open here, and I look into the settings of that project, we'll see a link here for the campaign. So this is actually one way that you could link to an existing campaign. I can say, oh, I want this linked to our brand new, Acme campaign that we have here. Or whichever one it is, you can go ahead and link those together here. And this is also a way for you to kind of quickly access the campaign as well. So kind of allows you to jump in, jump in using this blue link here to open that campaign. This is an older one here, but once you have a link between project and campaign, clicking the button here will take you to the dashboard of that campaign. Kind of a nice way to see the back and forth between the two. And again, this is also a way to take existing projects or projects that you created and accidentally didn't highlight as part of a campaign and add it to that campaign. So those are kind of the major methods for adding projects. Again, we can create new projects when we open a campaign. I know that I need these 3 jobs when we kick this off, or I can link existing projects here. I'm going to circle back into segments, but this is a way for you to separate logical separations between groupings of projects. I could say phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or, just whatever I want to do for the separations, quarter 2 jobs, quarter 3 jobs, however I want to build this and separate it. And segments give you a logical separation between projects, and they also allow you to build budgets that get a bit more granular. So you could say I have a campaign level budget, I have a segment level budget, and I have a project level budget. And each one would be kind of at a different tier of where we're looking in terms of the numbers. So, campaign obviously would be the biggest, subdivided into segments, and then the individual projects could have their own campaigns as well. I have a couple questions here. If my campaign is an opportunity campaign, if I choose templates to add, will it add opportunity projects or real projects? At the opportunity level, it should be adding opportunity projects. And that is a good question, and actually kind of a segue to one of the other methods for importing or creating campaigns I wanted to discuss as well. You can create campaigns from an opportunity. So if you're currently using our sales system here in Workamajig, one of the options that you'll have when you enable your advanced features is to set either, is it a one-off standalone project, or am I looking at a campaign? And so a campaign will kind of start relatively blank here when you do that. Let me just put one in here real quick. But you can begin to set up your projects and segments like normal. So the question was basically, hey, if I start to add projects here at this level, are these real projects or are they opportunity projects? These would be opportunity projects until the point that you actually make that campaign live. And then Kate asks, what do I mean by linking jobs to a campaign? Sorry, jobs are just another way of saying projects here. So projects and jobs, interchangeable term. Just means that I'm finding projects that are separate from the campaign or creating new projects and adding them to that campaign. Okay, so So going to continue here with this. So again, kind of a couple different ways to get here where we have a campaign initiated or to get projects to the campaign, either from creating the projects using templates or linking existing projects. I mentioned that we also have segments here. I'm going to create these after we create or look at least one estimate, but actually, let's go ahead and do this now. Again, segments, you would define them one at a time. And this is also a process that you could have a completely blank set of projects. So just pretend that these ones aren't here for a moment. And when you add a segment, you can also add the projects that would be part of the segment. So I could say, you know what, if this was my phase one jobs, I could say, okay, phase one includes, you know, this admin template, this events template, and a brochure job or something like that. And so again, it would define a phase or a segment, and it would put these projects underneath it here. You can also have a description for that phase or segment. Again, just kind of looking at it saying, hey, this is the, you know, the kickoff for these. The client wants the initial projects to be these or whatever detail I'd like to put in here. And then a timeline for when I think that's going to run. This is an optional piece, but again, it's something that you can use when you're looking at the scheduling side. I'm going to define this one without any projects underneath it, and then we'll go ahead and move some jobs underneath it. So here's our phase one phase that we've created. Our first projects were created with no segments, so that's where they end up. But I do have the ability to click and drag these. So I can say, you know what, Workamajig template should be part of phase one. I'm going to go ahead and define a second segment for phase two. And again, typically I'd probably add at least one project in here. Let's add a brand ID job. We'll add a phase two with a brand ID that will place that in here. And again, I can go ahead and drag and drop these here wherever they need to go. So the phases, again, just give me the ability to create a logical separation between my jobs. We first go through these two, and then we start the next two, or something to that effect here. And it also adds an extra layer of budgeting. So when you go to build a budget in this project, whether it's by service or by project, however you're building the budget, we will also give you a breakout per phase of what the financial totals are from a budget and an actual perspective. So it's just an extra added layer of detail there. So segments are by no means required. They're obviously something that are a special use case, but they do give you some additional tools to work with at the campaign level. So to start with, for a campaign, we're defining the campaign for the client. We are building out the projects here. And if I'm approaching this, and these are all brand new projects, typically at this point of the process, I would want to go through each one of these jobs and start to set them up. So, you know, again, if I know every job at the start of a campaign, great, I'm going to go ahead and define those. I might even define a few segments here to kind of give me that detail. And then from the screen, you can click on any of these lines here. So I could click on this Workamajig template project and go through a standard setup process for this. Now, ideally, these are all being copied from a template. So when I look at the schedule for this, there's already a bunch of detail here, right? I've got my task lines already set up. I've got my flow for the project. So it has the specific order of the tasks. It has the duration for them. And then finally, you know, who would be assigned and how long it would typically take those users. Now, these are all service level assignments. So instead of saying who my graphic designer is, for example, I'm just saying, hey, this task requires a graphic designer. And it's at this point I could come through and adjust this, right? So for this particular project that's part of the campaign, I can make changes here and say, you know what, for this one, I do want to give a couple of extra days for the design. I'm going to give an extra day for copy. I might even change the allocations here. I don't know, maybe, but that's all up to you, right? I can kind of do all of that. And that would be part of this process of me setting up this project, making those decisions, making any changes that I need on the schedule here, and then going through the standard process of setting this up. You know, I could jump into my project settings, set the start and the end date. I can begin to set up the team at an individual project level. And you could do that for each one of these. Now, I mentioned that you can store estimates and budgets at multiple levels here. For campaigns, it's not necessarily required that you have project level estimates, although we do try to encourage you to keep them wherever possible because, you know, it all kind of goes to keeping the overall campaign in budget, making sure all of the individual campaign or projects that are part of that campaign are also in budget as well. So you can, of course, still build project level estimates. I actually did that for these here. And remember, when you're creating an estimate here in Workamajig, you have the ability to auto pull that labor from your schedule. So the process for opening this process would, for opening these projects that are part of the campaign are going to be very similar to what you would see in just a standalone project. We'd still recommend you review the schedule. We'd still recommend you come through and build the estimate, but hopefully this process is relatively easy. And this may not even be something that you show to the client. You may just create this estimate here as an internal budget piece, right? My campaign is budgeted at $25,000, but this project is, $5,000 of that, just as an example. And you can basically auto pull that labor. So Workamajig kind of starts a project budget for you automatic. Oh, I almost nailed that. This is about $5,000. So yeah, Workamajig will kind of start that process for you based off of what your standard service rates are and the number of hours that I've said each one of those services are going to be needed on my schedule. Then from there, all I have to do is fill in my expenses. So this is definitely something we still encourage that you to do if at all possible. Just works in service to trying to give you the most visibility possible about the individual parts of your campaign and if any of them are having budget or schedule issues. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one out of here. So, in this way, you can kind of go through the standard process, my schedule, my estimates. I double check my project settings. I'd primarily do this for my start and my end dates. This start date is always going to default to the campaign's start date on any project added to it. So there may need to be some adjustment here on that. I could come in and say, oh, you know what, I want this first project to start on December 1st or something like that. I probably should have set my campaign to a start date of December 1st in that scenario. But each project will have a start date of the campaign start date, and then you can adjust them from there. You'll also notice here in this particular project that we're looking at, I mentioned earlier that you have the link to the campaign itself, and also the campaign segment is visible here too. Not much you can do from this in this dropdown, and you can just move the project between the two segments, but this does kind of give you that visibility. And again, if I was approaching this directly from the project, I could say, you know what, I need to go back and take a look at that campaign, and clicking this here would take me back there to allow me to view the campaign dashboard. So in a standard intake process here for campaigns, you could also assign the team. That would, again, be one of the last pieces that you do on the project itself. As part of the setup, I'd come in and determine who's going to work on this. So again, in my schedule, I said I needed some graphic design time. I needed a creative director. I need a copywriter, things like that. In here, I can go ahead and add the team. This is all exactly the same way that you would set up the project team on an existing project already. And so you can do that from here. So the idea is basically that you would go through each project individually. In this workflow, at least, there's a couple of different ways to do this, and then set up the details. What's my schedule look like? Do I need to make any adjustments to the timeline? Let's set up a budget, and then finally assign the team and put the project into a production status. Outside of that, I mentioned that there's some new features here to allow you to assign a team at the campaign level. So, that was looking at one individual project saying, okay, for this Workamajig template project, which, by the way, I probably want to change my project name in the settings here. That's one of the things I did gloss over. We may want to actually name this something that's not the template name. That's kind of up to you. But, one of the options or one of the steps of the process here was to assign the team and the roles for that team, and then auto assign that team to your schedule. This is basically kind of a quick way to say, okay, you know what, my graphic designer is going to be this person. My, I'll add a couple of other people here. My account manager is going to be this person, and then Joe will handle my creative direction. And when you auto assign, it will go ahead and push those hours to the schedule for you, or push these users to the schedule. So now you'll see here at the schedule level for this particular project, we've added the users. It's no longer just the role, it's the initials of the users that are actually assigned to these. That's kind of what it typically looks like here. We've also added at the campaign level, the ability to assign a team here and auto assign the team here from the campaign level as well. This is one of the new features I was talking about, designed to kind of make this process a little bit easier. In here, you can basically come in and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to be using the same graphic designer for all of these projects. So I can come in and say, you know what, that graphic designer is going to be this person. Come in here and, grab the service, graphic design, and then I can auto assign. And this would actually look across every project that's part of this campaign and auto assign this user to wherever this service is needed on all of the projects that are a part of this. Obviously, it's going to be a mixture of team members, or you may use multiple different designers. This is not necessarily the tool for you here, but if you have one team that's kind of committed to the entire campaign here and is working all of these projects, this is a really nice time saver for you. And also, this doesn't push any of the details of the approved estimates to your schedules either. So it's kind of a nice bypass for this, for that piece as well. I know that some of my clients kind of manage the timing around when they approve their project level estimates because they don't want the schedules to change. That's kind of a niche piece here. But just note that this auto assign, if you're very familiar with how this tool works, typically it pushes the estimated hours of project schedules to your to the schedules to change them, and that's not necessarily the case here at this level. So again, this tool here, just kind of a way for you to bypass having to manage, each one of these if the team is largely going to be the same across each one of your projects. Now, aside from that, the team tab here and assigning teams from this is kind of one major way for adding projects to a campaign. Just note too that it's also perfectly fine to open a campaign where you don't know what all of the projects would be at the outset of it. That's a very common piece here. You can even start a blank campaign, and when you add new projects into the system, one of the options you'll see is to dump that project directly into a campaign. Right. So that may be the process. You may build a campaign and then build a budget for that campaign. So you kind of have a watermark or a line in the sand that says, hey, this is as far as we can go. And then the client just says, hey, I gave you X number of dollars, and then you'll use it on projects I request until we use that up. And then we can speak to that. That's a fairly common relationship that we have here. So that's also perfectly fine. I could basically open up a campaign, ignore this process entirely to start it, and then just start an estimate to set my budget there if I'd like. So a number of different ways to approach this. Your mileage may vary depending on how you need this to work for you. But just note that this isn't the only way to set your campaigns up. They're pretty flexible. Okay, so that's really what you would go through for the project setup here. There's not really anything different. It's just, again, you would probably want to make sure, you'd probably want to make sure that you have, you've gone through these if you're opening up your projects as soon as you're opening your campaign and adjusting the details for them here. One of the other things I did want to show here is you can update multiple project fields here within the campaign projects and segment breakout as well. So if you don't want to individually fire off all of the projects, for example, I could come in here and say, you know what, I'm going to set both of these projects to a production status here now. And that can be done from the screen. That's especially useful if you have campaigns that are quite large, getting into projects more than, 5 or 10, for example. This can be really handy to come through and say, you know what, we're going to fire off all of phase 1 right now. So I could click that checkbox, and then I can adjust a number of different pieces in here. This would change each project in mass from one area. That's one of the major ideas of a campaign, is to give you a big bird's eye tool to be able to adjust multiple projects underneath that same reporting umbrella. Now, I mentioned that you, in some cases, may start with an estimate, but if we're going through kind of a standard process of, hey, I'm opening a campaign, I know exactly how many projects are going to be part of it here, the estimate would be the next step in that process, or creating the estimates. And this is very similar to projects. You will have a budget on a campaign as soon as that estimate is approved. That budget will match the dollar amount for the campaign itself. But the estimate types are a little bit different. You have 2 different estimate types that you can create in a campaign level. One of those is by project only. The other is by service only. The meaning for these are where the system is getting the details. So if we look at by service only, this is a big list of the services that you have in system setup. It allows you to say how many hours in total that you're going to use on this campaign for those services. You're not really getting specific to a project level. You're basically saying, okay, when I'm looking at my total labor here, the breakout is going to be, what service do I need? How many hours do I need it? And then how much would that be billed to the client for potentially? Or what's the gross budget for that? That kind of 2 sides of the same coin there. So if I'm building this from scratch, this is basically what I can do. I can say, you know what, we've told the client it's going to be 20 hours of account management. It's going to be 40 hours of design, 15 hours of graphic design. You can adjust the hours, the rates. All of this is very similar to what you do at a project level. Although my guess is that if you work with project level estimates, those are typically task and service estimates. So it's going to look a teeny bit different from this. A task and service estimate is going to have a separate area here where you say per task where these services go. This is just a big list of services, and it's saying, hey, for however many projects that I'm adding to this campaign here, the total I'm budgeting for account management is 20 hours. And we'll track the actuals of all of the projects where those times are entered against this line that we set here. Now, the other side of this would be by project only. And this is typically something that you would use when you know what the projects for a campaign are when you're opening them up. The idea would be that I would open the projects and create the estimates at the project level first. In this projects and segments area, I would come through and I'd define for each of these projects what the budget was. I'd approve those estimates. And then at a campaign level, when we're creating a project only estimate, this is a little bit different. When we actually look into the total here, it's not a breakout between labor and expenses. It's just a grand total. So when I click into this here, it's going to say, okay, these are the 4 projects that I found, and which estimate from that project, oh, let's unapprove this. Which estimate from that project would you like to use? It's actually going to give you a drop down that will show you each individual estimate, as well as a subtotal of all of them. So if you only have a single estimate, it's always going to be 2 options here, the estimate itself, and then a list that says all. Honestly, you could actually choose either of the 2. All approved is typically what I go with here. But either way, it's just saying the budget I found for this job is $4478.75, right? So that's what we're using for this one. And for this job, the budget's $14,975. Again, same thing. We're basically just saying, yep, I want to use this budget and this budget and this budget. And it combines the totals of all of those together to create a campaign level budget, $31,000 in this case here. I have one here that's missing an estimate, but you know, again, typically I'd want to have created that before I got to this screen here. So those are the 2 major processes for creating estimates here for campaigns. Again, they're going to be largely driven by your workflow process and what your needs are for campaign creation. If you just, you know, get arrangements for the client where you don't know what a lot of the projects are, by service only really does shine in that instance. This is a very easy estimate to set up as well, because you're basically just throwing numbers into a big budget envelope that you can watch against here. By project only is going to give you a lot more specific information. But again, it's typically going to be in workflows where you know each of the projects when you're opening the campaign initially, or at least you have a good set of projects to start with, because just like at a project level for a campaign, you can also create change orders. So if your client started with 4 jobs and now they're adding 3 more, great. I can just add a secondary estimate after I add those projects and then update my campaign estimate with a change order. That's also entirely possible as well. And you'll see here when you go to open a new estimate here at the campaign level, the bottom piece here by estimate type is what's determining the type of estimate we're looking at. Is it by project or service only? And the difference is going to be, you know, those 2 pieces that I've shown you there. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier here, you're typically not going to have 2 estimates on the same campaign. Like this, at least on the outset, you may have change orders that come down the line. Certainly typically would not mix by project and by service only. That would be a little bit unusual. But this is just so we can kind of see what the difference between the 2 is. And I also want to show you how that looks on the budget screens once these are approved. So we're going to come back here and switch the approval from this by project only to service only estimate somewhere down the line here. I'll show you what that difference is. But again, ideally, typically we would, with a new campaign, I'm just creating one estimate and then choosing the estimate type that best serves my needs for this particular campaign. Okay, so I have a question here from Jody saying, we're debating using campaigns versus retainers for budget and project tracking. What would be the benefit to use campaigns and what's the difference? Well, retainers are specifically a billing functionality. Retainers are basically saying, I have a means now to set my projects to a status that says that the project itself doesn't really contain the billing information. We're just billing a retainer. And our retainer system, I really like it here, but it doesn't work for some clients because it is a rigid per month billing. So for retainers, we're basically saying, hey, I'm saying per period. So let's say per month, I want to bill $1,000 for this client. That's the retainer agreement. You can even bill extras. But that $1,000 is a static amount, regardless of the amount of effort put into the retainer itself. That is an issue for some clients because they will, bank hours or charge overages, and we don't do that. We basically say, hey, if this service is considered in scope for the retainer, then it's in scope for kind of an unlimited number of hours, right? Whether it's 10 hours or 100, so long as it's that same service, we don't charge any overages for it. It'd be determined by what was entered. So just from a billing standpoint alone, if that's an issue for you, campaigns can be kind of a better way to do that. You don't have to bill campaigns a fixed fee. You can bill them actuals as well. But campaigns can have billing schedules, so you can effectively do the same thing and decide to charge overages if you'd like. Honestly, I can't necessarily tell you which one's better. There's not really necessarily a better. It really depends on situations. And retainer or campaigns tend to be, this isn't necessarily true in every instance, but they tend to have a lot more project work linked to them than a retainer does. But honestly, from a reporting standpoint, they both have relatively similar capabilities. The major difference is that if I'm looking at a retainer, I'll have a dashboard screen that will let you know specifically how much that you've billed, the total labor gross, and the potential profitability all in one screen. You can kind of get that at a campaign level, but you're more than likely going to have to pull some level of reporting to get profitability at least. Sorry for the very complicated answer. Honestly, it's probably better to run that one by your account manager, because they're going to have a better feel for what your process looks like than I would, and they'll be able to kind of speak to what might work better for you. Retainers are very easy to set up and maintain, but they don't quite get you as much flexibility as a campaign would. So there's kind of ups and downs for either of the two solutions depending on what you need. Okay, so we left off here on estimates. I want to show through the next kind of few tabs here for a campaign as well. The first here is the campaign settings. There's a few different pieces in here to discuss for the campaign. We're going to be coming back to this a few more times throughout the session here today. But this is really where you'd see some of the top level information for your campaign. So if the ID or the name, if you have a typo in them, if you want to change them for some reason, you can do that here. I mentioned that your campaign can have a start or an end date here. So this would, anytime I add a project, it would say, okay, the start date for that project is also going to be whatever start date that I have here. The end date will allow you to adjust and monitor the schedule health of your campaign by monitoring the projects that are a part of it. You can add descriptions and objectives, things like that here. But there are some very nice things here for billing on the right-hand side. And this is something that we're going to kind of finish our campaign run through here. This is one of the major reasons to use campaigns in Workamajig, is the ability to group multiple projects together to bill them. So that can be presented as a single line still. If you'd like, for the client purposes, you can just say, hey, there's just a single line on here. It's for this campaign. Or you can show that to them in that way. And you'll notice here, one of the options that you have in a campaign is to determine whether you want to bill a campaign by project or by campaign. So billing by campaign is basically saying, okay, the assumption is that we're going to group the projects that are part of this campaign together and bill them as a collective. That can be as a time and materials piece or fixed fee. If you've set a campaign to bill by campaign, you're also going to have the bill option here underneath the production dropdown. This gives you the ability to bill a campaign fixed fee directly out of the campaign itself, with a couple of different options for line detail. You can also use the campaign budget. This is kind of, one of the ways to fix fee bill a campaign. And just like your projects, you can determine whether or not expenses are included in those budgets. So you can opt to bill the labor as a fixed fee, but bill your expenses at time and materials, so cost plus markup, right? And for your campaigns, you also have the option to create a billing schedule. This kind of actually does linked a bit to that retainer question, where you can basically create a schedule here out of the campaign to say, every month we bill X number of dollars out of it here, but these can be triggered billings that you also bill additional amounts or overages on top of if you need. Then some details here around what layout you used in the line detail. We'll kind of get more back to that, but those fields again are big pieces for a campaign here, and that allows you to determine the billing settings for it. We're going to circle back to that again here in a moment. I do want to show off a few of the other features of a campaign here, specifically the production pieces. So once your campaign is up and running, these are the tools that you'd have specifically to maintain a campaign. You've probably noticed, again, similar to projects, you have the ability to keep campaign level conversations, campaign level deliverables, if you'd like. I see that most of my clients still create the deliverables at the project level. I think that's perfectly fine. This, again, is just a way to kind of house all of the deliverables in a single place, if you'd like. Just like your projects, you can have specs at the campaign level. You can have files at the campaign level. Again, mostly I see probably the majority of my clients using campaigns still store a lot of this information at the project level, but it's really up to you. You have the ability to store it either. This can be especially helpful, again, when you need a central repository for all of those files. It's nice to store them here at the campaign level. I mentioned your campaigns will also have a budget here for the breakout. So this campaign does have a budget. This campaign's budget screen is definitely something that can be adjusted pretty easily here underneath the More button. You have the ability to go into your campaign budget settings. And by default, what we do is we give you a top-level line for the campaign itself that kind of rolls up all of the detail, a line for each of the segments of that campaign. So again, I mentioned that a segment can separate some of your budget within that campaign. So when we look at this, we see, okay, you know what, the total is 31,000, and that's broken out between these two phases in these amounts, right? So kind of a next step down. This will only be here if you're using segments on the campaign itself. And then, of course, the projects that are part of that campaign. Now, one of the challenges I like to speak to in here when I'm talking to my clients about building and using campaigns here in Workamajig is that this screen will allow you to report at a campaign level or at a project level. It allows you to report at both. And so just keep that in mind when you're looking at this here and how these fields operate. These did used to kind of copy the numbers for the actual hours for each one of these. So it would total them up. But again, just remember that's what you're looking at here. The project budgeted hours will break out into 224 here. But if I'm looking at the field for campaign budget hours, you'll notice it really doesn't have anything at the project level, but the project field does. So just note that there's a difference between the two. I know it's a little bit confusing, but we're technically looking at two different levels of reporting within the same screen here. So I just tell my clients to make sure that that's understood when you're looking at these fields. This does not mean that you haven't budgeted any hours for this particular project. It's just that the field here is specific for campaign budget hours, actual remaining, and we can't really show anything at a project level for that. But for the most part, I think it's probably pretty easy to work with this here. Again, you can adjust these columns here underneath the campaign budget settings. This edit columns area here will allow you to determine, first of all, which fields you like. There's a tremendous number of fields in here. And again, these are separated between campaign and project. So just whatever level, whatever word precedes the field here lets you know what level that the budget screen is looking at. Is it looking at a campaign level or is it looking at a project level? And then once you've added those fields, you have the ability to adjust the display order here. So these fields can be clicked and dragged around according to the order that you'd like. They'll display from top to bottom, left to right in the grid. So campaign budget hours, actual hours, that's exactly how these would look according to how you have them set here. Again, the budget is going to be determined by what we have approved for these. So if I unapprove my first estimate and approve my other one, it will change the figures in here because the dollar totals were different. And again, what we were looking at from a breakout from that service only is looking at this service level. And in your budgets here, you actually have the ability to click into these projects to get an idea of what the individual budget breakouts are too. So if I want to see for this web design project in particular here, for example, I can just click into the line here and then it will show you, okay, this is what you've budgeted for in particular on that project, these services in this amount for a grand total of this many hours at the project level. And then you could also look at the actuals per. So I like to stack these next to each other, obviously. Typically, what I like to do is, what the current budget hours versus the remaining are here. Typically, I would also have actuals in here. I don't know. I must have adjusted this at some point to move that field around. And I like to keep my campaign level pieces on one side and my project on the other. To me, that just makes this a lot cleaner to read. And it looks like I have not followed my own rules in here. I must have arranged these around. But just again, note that you can adjust this to whatever you need, and the budget is going to be based off of the approved budgets for your campaign. One last piece here from a project management level, you have the ability to view campaign transactions very similar to what you can do for projects. This is just a big list of all of the transactions that are linked to projects that are part of this campaign. Again, your team would still track time and mark tasks as complete from the projects that are part of this campaign, but all of the details in those projects would be visible here in the transactions area. And you also have a campaign level schedule in here as well that I'd like to show you. This looks actually somewhat similar to the traffic calendar screen. And we've made some pretty significant changes to this tool here as well. So again, if you've used campaigns previously and never really quite used the screen because it wasn't really functional for you, we have had some client-driven changes in here that we've made to make this a little bit easier. Namely, you have the ability to hide tasks in the screen here now. So if you have a very long set of projects here in your campaign, you have the ability to say, you know what, I only want to see the active projects. We've also added the ability to add column sets to this page. So basically allowing you to say, you know what, now you can change these fields. Previously, you could not do that to rearrange or add additional fields to what's being shown here. And you have the ability to do that. And you can also have different column sets. So you could say, you know, this is, you know, Jane's column set. This is Daniel's column set. Or, you know, this one's more billing and budgeting. This one's more project management. However you'd like, those layouts would appear here. And the columns that you see will change according to which set that you've chosen. So again, those can be set up here underneath the More button by clicking Edit Column Sets. And then you can define a new one. I just have one called Default here right now. And so we can define the rows in their order here, define what the sets are, and then those sets will be visible to choose with this dropdown. So really kind of managing the schedule here a little bit more flexible from the campaign level, allowing you to, we've added a number of different fields to be visible in here that weren't visible previously, added the ability to hide completed tasks. And even without those changes, the entire goal of this screen here is, of course, to show you the timeline of all of the projects that are part of your campaign with a Gantt view here as well to be able to see the details of when these tasks would fire. So the Gantt here can be shown or hid with this option here, and we do have a day, a month, or a day, a week, or a month view here for the Gantt. My projects aren't very long, so my month view is looking a little sad. But this again kind of gives you the idea of what those would be there. And you have the ability to view and manage these tasks out of the schedule here as well. So I do have the ability to come through here and say, okay, you know what, these are my phase 1 and phase 2 projects. Let me pop that open here. And then I could jump into any of these projects. So I could say, you know what, for Workamajig template, let's take a peek. Okay, these are the assignments. And I could click into here to get a flyout and manage that task from the screen here as well. So I could make reassignments if I'd like. I could adjust the parameters and say, you know what, we're going to give 2 days for this, or, you know, I want to change the planned start, or, you know, add a predecessor, any of those different things. You can manage those just by clicking the task that's in the view here. Also, a little bit squished for time, so I'm not going to go too far into cross-project predecessors, but that's one of the tools that we're adding here at this level, or have added to here at this level here as well. One of the changes from the screen. Cross-project predecessors are basically a way to allow you to say that a task in one project is the predecessor for the task in a completely different project. That's especially useful at a campaign level, where you can say, you know what, project 1, when this project is finished, I want the task line of this first task to start. And you can actually see that here. It's the different project number and the task line that it's saying it's waiting for before this project starts. So you have the ability to view and set those cross-project predecessors here in this campaign schedule screen as well. That's a new feature. Again, just trying to get more towards giving teams more tools to manage big campaigns here in a single screen without having to do so much micromanagement at the project level. Okay, so I mentioned billing here. I do want to speak to billing a little bit before we wrap this up here today. I mentioned that in your campaign settings, this is where you can set the campaign to bill. The default for this is always going to be by project, which again is just saying, okay, you've grouped the campaign together for budgeting purposes, and you can still bill the projects collectively with things like a billing worksheet, or if I go to a mass billing screen, if you bill currently using the mass billing screens. I'll get to the campaigns piece here, but I could jump in and say, oh, all of these jobs are time and material, and they are all part of this same campaign, for example. So I could pull those up and say, you know, specifically, let's just look at these jobs, and I want to build these projects. I don't have any time entered to any of them, so there's nothing found here. But if I did, I could have those 4 jobs and say, you know what, I want to build them all at the same time, just as an example. And then the settings from the client can make that 4 separate invoices, or it could make it 1 invoice for the client for all of those pieces in a campaign. However, you know, by default, the setting here is to say, okay, we're going to bill by project, and then I'll let you figure out how you want to bill those individually. You can group them together. You can bill them one at a time here. If I set this to bill by campaign, the assumption is, again, that's what gives us this option here, this bill option that is actually invisible until you set this to bill by campaign. So if you've used these before and you're wondering why this isn't here, that's the reason. And then you can kind of decide what that looks like. So when you're billing by campaign, the system is going to create a single invoice for the campaign itself, or at least that's the assumption. And that invoice can have multiple lines on it. So if the setting for the client, for example, is 1 invoice per project, but 1 line per project, for example, we could do that. We could create a single line invoice for the campaign with 1 line for each of the projects. There's a lot of moving pieces here. So if you do have some very specific questions on invoicing a campaign, I would definitely talk to your account manager. But this is actually pretty easy. And this is another thing that we've kind of made some major changes to here recently for campaigns as well. We really wanted to make it a little bit easier to bill campaigns, especially as a fixed fee amount. Of course, you are always able to bill time and materials. I think the grouping options for those were pretty good, but there were some challenges for billing a campaign at flat amounts here, and setting a campaign to bill by campaign is kind of the first piece of that. And then again, you can decide whether you want to use the campaign budget or not. If you're using the campaign budget, we're still creating a single invoice for the campaign itself. But we're specifically looking at the budget amount set in the estimate. And again, just like at your project level, you can determine whether or not you want the expenses to be included or not. I also mentioned that you can have billing schedules at a campaign level. This again would be something that would be useful for a retainer style relationship for a client, because I could come in here and say, you know what, we bill, you know, $5,000 a month for this. We're going to start on December 1st. And I can actually copy these lines here too. So I could say, you know, we're going to do that in January, February, March, April, and May, right? That's all. This is a 6-month contract. We're billing $5,000 a month here. And just like at the project level, you have the ability to set up a billing schedule for this campaign here if you'd like, to kind of match what you have in your projects if you'd like. Also, if your campaign, there we go. If your campaign is set to bill by campaign here, you may have noticed when I was on the Today billing page, we have added an additional area here in the to bill as of, or the mass billing tools, specifically to bill fixed fee campaigns. So we'll see my campaign right here with the total amount. If I have a billing schedule, it would be picked up here. So it would say, hey, we bill $5,000 in December, so there's nothing to bill here yet. I haven't, so it basically just throws the full budget in here and says, hey, what do you want to bill for this? So again, I could come in here and say, I want to bill this for $5,000. And then I could invoice and generate this kind of with whatever line detail that I'd like here with at the campaign level. So this would be specifically for fixed fee, of course. I mentioned that if you bill ad hoc out of a campaign, either here or if you bill the mass billing screens, that's going to assume a fixed fee amount that you're billing the budget for the project here. In the bill at the campaign level is very similar to what you see in the mass billing screen. So if I go under the production piece here and I click bill, this is almost identical to what you'd see in a project that's set to fixed fee billing. The difference is you can't tab between actuals or not here, and your invoice by is going to be different as well. The invoice by determines the internal line detail of what's going to end up on the invoice. What your client sees would be dependent on the invoice layout or template that you use, but this is determining the internal line detail. So it can be a percentage of segment or a percentage of project. right? Where you say, okay, these are the individual projects that are part of this here. You do also have the ability to go by service, I believe, as well, if I don't have segments. I can't remember that exactly here, but again, this is going to determine what you see on the invoice. So the lines that we see here, and I could say, we're billing, half of this, or we're billing, 10,000 or 10%, whatever the percentage is to bill here, we could do that. And you could create a revenue invoice out of this that would just kind of grab this line detail here for you. I mentioned that you can also bill time and materials for a campaign as well. There's two different ways to do that. One of those would be just to use, I guess we could stay on that screen here. One of those would just be to use the mass billing screens themselves. As you saw, when I clicked into the time and materials, if we click these three dots here, one of the filters that you're offered is a campaign dropdown. So you can say, I only want to see the projects from this campaign. And potentially you could decide if you want to group those on the same invoice or if you want to invoice them individually. And you can, of course, create campaigns if you use billing worksheets as a primary billing methodology here. You can filter to campaigns on the screen here as well. And again, same thing. You have a number of different grouping options for your campaign. It can be one line per project. It can be, one invoice per project that's part of the campaign, and, however you want to do that. But those options are here. We've just added the ability to added some more tools for fixed fee billing at the campaign level. Okay, so lots of stuff going on here. And with campaigns, again, there's a lot of different ways to manage these. So the question around whether or not you need to use these is typically related to if you're needing to create multiple projects or use multiple templates to deliver on an agreement with a client and want to keep all of that information underneath the same umbrella. You can get extremely detailed with campaigns, and they will reward you with a lot of good reporting and control over multiple projects. Or you can kind of quickly set them up as a shell that you can use to check multiple project budgets around. Those are all use cases that I think are perfectly viable. I have clients that use either of the two of them. And again, just like anything else in Workamajig, you don't necessarily have to feel like, because campaigns are in the system, that you have to use them. They're designed here to make your life easier. And if they don't accomplish that goal, then they're probably not the best tool for you here. But they are really great for managing any group of multiple projects for scheduling, billing, or budgeting purposes, or all three of those things. Okay, so a couple minutes here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat here. While I wait to see if anyone throws those in there, I did want to point out that we do have a really good guide here in our help guide for campaigns. I believe there's a video in here as well. Let me drag this over from my other monitor here. This campaigns overview article. I'll go ahead and throw this in the chat for the webinar. So if you want to take a peek at our documentation for this here, you can do that. Again, it's pretty detailed in here, and I would encourage you, if you have any specific questions or if you're interested in this tool and you're wondering how it would apply to your workflow specifically, again, your account manager would be a really good resource for that. So, feel free to reach out to your account manager at support@workamajig.com if you have any specific questions around how this works or how it would impact, your workflow, or kind of what the best practices are for deploying this. Okay, well, it looks like you guys got your questions out during the session here, so that's good. I want to thank you guys for coming in here and listening to me chat about campaigns. Again, if you guys have any questions or you need anything, support@workamajig.com. We're always happy to help here. And I hope you guys have a great day. I did add the link here, Kate. I'm not sure if you're seeing it. Let me do it again here one more time. Oh, it's a host and panelist. That's why I didn't put it in everyone. Sorry about that. Let me try this one more time. Okay. I'll go ahead and put that link here for you. There we go. There's the link to the documentation. Sorry about that. I put it in the wrong chat grouping. So there it is. You got it. Thanks again for coming, you guys. I hope you guys have a great day.